Tonight we want to talk about something we call integrity. We've been through this series called What's in the Bag, and really talking about character development. And when I talk about what's in the bag, we're talking about the idea that we are the bag. We are our minds, our hearts, our souls, our lives. We are the bag. And we want to ask yourself the question, what is inside the bag of my life? What's really going on here? And we can really fool the world, and we can really trick people and all sorts of things, but really asking ourselves, what's really going on inside of my heart, my mind? And tonight, I want to really ask the question, what's in the bag? Is integrity in your bag? Is there really integrity inside your heart? And so when we talk about the word integrity, for our purposes, I'm going to define integrity as being this. Being who you say you are. Integrity is being who you say you are. So often we say we are a certain type of person, or we, particularly those of us who are in church circles, we may say we're one thing, but we come to find out we're actually something totally different. Who are you really when no one is looking? Did you hear my voice just crack like I was 13 again? That was weird. Who are you really? Really ask yourself that question. I think it's an important question that we ought to often be asking ourselves. Is there integrity really in my bag? There was an old show way back in the 1970s. I know I wasn't even born yet in the 1970s. I know, it's shocking to think that I wasn't even born back in the 1970s. And so there's a show called Let's Make a Deal. And basically, the show was about people who would be offered a deal. They would be offered has anyone ever seen the show, like on reruns, like on the Game Network? Okay, so Let's Make a Deal was a show basically where people would be offered a prize or an item of value of some sort, and then they would be offered an opportunity to trade that. And so the idea was that they had something of value, but there comes a point where many of us are willing to trade what we have in exchange for something that's being offered to us. And the TV show was all about people making a deal or taking a risk of losing what they've got for something greater. And we do this all the time in our life. Almost every single time we're making a deal. And I've talked about this probably every week because it's just so prevalent in my life. But I am really working at changing my eating habits recently. Working out, I'm losing weight and trying to be healthier, and I just want to be like swole and strong like Andrew. And so seriously, man, you see Andrew with his shirt off, and he's just, girls, you don't want to look because you'll lust. Don't do it. And so, but every time I look at a cookie, like outside, there's these great cookies that they smelled very good. And so I'm basically saying to myself, let's make a deal, Kenny. Are you willing to take on the calories and the sugar that will lead to more of this? Right? This right here that I don't want. Right? That's disgusting. You don't want that. You want to get rid of it. For the moment. Like, what do I want more? Do I want the pleasure, or do I want to lose this? Am I willing to sacrifice the momentary pleasure to get rid of accomplish the ultimate goal? And when we talk about integrity, we're really talking about the idea that we ought to be people that are willing to sacrifice momentary pleasure to get something, to get a greater goal. And so, if we lack integrity, or if we are not who we say we are, then we're probably people that are willing to indulge in momentary pleasure, even if it's got long-term damaging effects. This is the case where something as small and simple as, I don't know, speeding. Speeding, the speed limit is 35 miles an hour, and maybe we're willing to drive 50 miles an hour, and we are breaking the law. We're willing to take a long-term risk of getting a ticket in exchange for getting to where we're going to go faster. Or something as grand or as large as something as having an affair if you're married. We're willing to sacrifice, some people are willing to sacrifice their marriage, what they've got in a relationship, in a covenant, for some momentary pleasure. And so, tonight as we kind of go through, I really want to ask you to really consider what type of person am I? Am I really the type of person that has integrity? Am I the type of person that really is willing to sacrifice momentary pleasures because I have a greater goal in mind? Or do I lack the resolve and the commitment to stick with the long-term goals in mind? There's a couple passages of Scripture I want us to kind of go to tonight. And so if you have Bibles, if you have Bibles there, we have the beautiful blues. And so if you're in the front row, they're under your seats here. I want to turn to a passage of Scripture, the book of Psalms. Psalm chapter 7. Actually, we're going to be bouncing around the book of Psalms a little bit tonight. If you have a Bible, we're going to go to Psalm chapter 7, verse 8. This is David, who... David is an interesting guy. I would say David, King David, if you're familiar with the life of King David at all, he was a shepherd boy. His most famous sort of feat was killing this 9-foot-tall, super strong guy named Goliath. David, he's a junior high boy when he's got a slingshot and he takes out one of the most strongest, fiercest warriors of the opponents of Israel. And that makes him famous. He has this moment where he takes out Goliath and he becomes famous. He becomes a worship leader in the temple. He eventually becomes king of Israel. And then he becomes most famous. His second, probably most famous thing he's known for is he had an affair where he gets a woman pregnant who's married. And then to cover it up, he ends up having this dude killed. Has him sent to the front lines to make sure he gets killed. And it's a kind of a long, crazy ordeal. But in fact, David had lots of sin and made lots of stupid choices. David was, if you study his life, was a pretty poor dad. In fact, he was a terrible father. Didn't really mentor his sons. Didn't really spend time with his kids a whole lot. His daughter gets raped and it doesn't do anything about it. Kind of just lets it be kind of like whatever. He really is a crappy dad. He's in a lot of ways. He's a porous king. He neglects some of his affairs as a king, some of his responsibilities. And you would examine the life of David, and you would say, this guy really is not a dude we want to be like. I mean, in a lot of ways, he made a lot of stupid choices. But on second thought, you really evaluate some of his writings. In the book of Psalms, in large part, are journal entries or poems or songs that David wrote. And I would say David is actually a man of great integrity in a lot of ways. David really is who he says he is. He's actually very quick to confess his sin. He's actually very quick to be very teachable throughout the course of his life when people confront him on his sin. And he's often very honest about what's going on. And so integrity is not necessarily the absence of sin, but integrity is really the willingness to be honest about what's going on in your heart. He says this in Psalm chapter 7, verse 8. The Lord judges peoples. Judge me, O Lord. He's asking God to pass judgment on him. Judge me, O Lord, according to my righteousness and according to the integrity that is within me. He's asking God, pass assessment on my life based on how much integrity I have. God, am I really who I say I am? I love when people are honest. I think about some people in my life that I know. Some people that are part of Mosaic Church that don't claim to be professed. They're not saying, "Hey, I'm a follower of Jesus." I'm thinking of one particular person, a part of our Disney campus, who is a part of our community, has become a friend of mine, who makes no bones about the fact that I don't necessarily know that I'm a follower of Jesus. I love hanging out with you guys. I love being a part of this community, but I'm not a Christian. I'm still journeying. I'm still trying to determine whether or not I want to follow Jesus. And he's real honest about where he's at, and so I don't expect him to necessarily follow the Bible. I don't demand that of him. I expect him to do what sinners do. I expect him to do what people who don't follow Jesus do. Because he's claiming, he's not professing that. And so there's actually a great respect level when people say they're one way and they actually are that way. That's actually a level of integrity. On the opposite, we have people that come into our churches and are a part of our circle. And I know some people that are a part of the Mosaic family that claim to follow Jesus. And I look at their life and go, really? Because I'm looking at your life, how you're living your life, and I'm looking what you say you do, and those two don't really seem to match. It's a lack of integrity. There's a recent poll taken by USA Today a couple years ago that says that Americans are willing to give up certain things for money. And so the question, they had a survey for what would you be willing to give up for $10 million? And they asked this question to Americans. And the survey is made up of people who said that their family was the most important thing in their life. Of the people who said their family was the most important thing in their life, 25% of Americans that say their family is number one said they'd be willing to give up their family for $10 million. 25% of Americans that claim, and I'm not saying all Americans, I'm just saying 25% of the Americans that claim that family's number one would be willing to give up their family for $10 million. 25% of people that say church is their number one priority say they would give up their church for $10 million. People who are asked, do you think prostitution is wrong? Of the people that said yes, not everyone, of the people who said yes, prostitution is wrong, 23% of them said they would be willing to be prostitutes for a week for $10 million. Of people who said they love the United States and they think America is the greatest country on the planet, of the people that said yes to that, 16% of them said they'd be willing to give up their American citizenship for $10 million. See, there's a trend of saying one thing and then someone coming and offering you something of value and you're willing to give it up. So I would say your family really isn't number one. Because if your family really is number one, there's no amount of money that they could take that away. That you would want to give that up for. 16% of Americans say they would leave their spouse for $10 million. Ain't crazy? 7% of people surveyed who say murder is wrong, 7% of people say murder is wrong, say they'd be willing to murder someone for $10 million, according to a recent survey. And this was the one I thought was, it bothered me the most. Maybe the murder one should have bothered me the most, but this one bothered me more than that. People surveyed, of the people surveyed who said, who do you love the most? People who responded to say their own children. 3% of them said they would give up their children for $10 million. I was a little bit excited about the fact that 97% said they would not give up their children for $10 million, but 3% still said they would. So are you who you really say you are? In the book of Psalms, chapter 7, there's the book of Psalms was originally written in Hebrew. The Hebrew word for integrity there that David uses actually means completeness, innocence, and perfection. So when David is saying, God, judge me to my integrity, we talk about integrity being who you are, and you actually being who you say you are, we're talking about the idea that integrity is being complete even when no one is watching you. Are you who you say you are? So if you're someone that says you don't lie, do you lie are you willing to lie if you know no one's going to catch you? If you say you're a person of integrity that would never steal, how about when you go to Olive Garden and they say, do you want soup or salad? And you order salad and the person at the table orders soup because you guys want to, you want to be able to share. And then you decide that, but the policy is that you can't share unlimited salad with someone. That's the policy at Olive Garden. I know, I used to work there. But people still share the salad with people at the table. What's no big deal? It's just a few tomatoes. What's the big deal? Well, technically, you've broken the policy Olive Garden has set, and you're stealing. We talk about the speed limit. The speed limit, you're breaking the law. Now, you claim to be someone that follows the law, but do you speed? I know I do on occasion. And I get speeding tickets. I got one last week. Rightfully so. I deserve one. How about burning music? How about software on our computer that we haven't paid for? I mean, it's technically stealing. So either we're people that are honest or we're people that we're not. And I think so often what we do is we pick and choose where we're going to have integrity and where we're not. We say, well, in this area, we would say we would never walk into Barnes & Noble. I would hope not. I would never walk into Barnes & Noble and take a CD and put it down my pants and walk out and steal it. I would never do that. That's wrong. That's stealing. That's theft. I would never do it. But gosh, do I have any songs on my iPod that I didn't pay for legally? That I acquired in a way? My friends, you can have this song, I'll burn it for you, I'll put it on your iPod. Technically, that would be theft, wouldn't it? It's no different. The format in which we acquired it is wrong, but it's still stealing, it's theft. We have not paid for the access to the song that we have. Well, but it's on Pandora anyway. Well, then delete it from your iPod and listen to it on Pandora. Listen to it in the legal manner. How about something as simple as, I go to the restaurant and I order a water, but I have a cup and, well, it's no big deal if I have a little bit of Diet Coke, a little bit of soda. Even though I didn't pay the $2 for the soda. I know people who do it. In fact, I remember about 12 years, this is a long time ago, I was an intern at a real large church in Illinois. And I remember I went to McDonald's once and I bought a Coke and I kept the cup. Whenever I would go back to McDonald's, I would go and bring the cup with me. I would refill it. Because I was poor. I was a poor intern. And here I am. I'm an intern at a church for 2 years, taking Bible college classes in seminary, training to be a pastor, learning how to live my life with character and integrity and honesty. And here I am, every time I go in, bringing my McDonald's cup with me. And I remember, I'll never forget it, my friend Pete Clark, we're sitting there one day and I ordered a 99-cent Big Mac, or 99-cent double cheeseburger. And at the time it was, I don't know if they still have the Big and Tasties. Does McDonald's even still have those? Yeah. The Big and Tasty, we used to call them the Big and Nasties. But I would order a double cheeseburger and a Big and Tasty because they were 99 cents each for $2, and I'd bring my cup that I kept in my car and would bring it with me and fill it up with a Coke. And I remember my friend, I'll never forget the day. We were at a McDonald's and a couple of us sat down and I brought it and I filled it up and he goes, "Where'd you get that cup from?" "Oh, I brought it from my car." And he goes, That's against the rule. Like the rule is you refill it on your, every time you come back you need to pay the $2 or whatever, $1 for the drink. I said, "Well, I can't afford that." He's like, "Well, then don't drink anything. You're stealing Coke from McDonald's. Do you realize that?" I'll never forget the moment. I was stealing Coke from McDonald's. So really examine your heart. Is there any areas of my life where I am saying I am one thing, but I'm actually another? If who you are doesn't match who you say you are, there's a problem. And this matters a lot because God created us to be like Him. Those of you who've been around here for any length of time with me, you know I say this regularly. God created us in His image for the purpose of reflecting Him. God created Adam and Eve with the imago Dei, the image of God. And the purpose of Adam and Eve in the garden were to have a relationship in such a manner that they reflected God to each other. God made everything perfect and good. But when He made humanity, He took elements of Himself and He endowed them in humanity. And He wants human beings to commune with each other in such a manner that people would look at each other and see Him. And God is who He says He is. And when we are not who we say we are, we don't reflect God. You see, God says He's a provider, so He provides. God says He's a healer, so He heals. God says that He is a comforter, so He comforts. God says He's a counselor, so He counsels. And when we are not who we say we are, when we don't actually do what we say we're going to do, we don't look like God. People are unable to look at us and say, "Oh, that's what God looks like." We're unable to fulfill that which God made us to fulfill. We're unable to fulfill that which God created us for. We're not complete. We're not good. And so God calls us to be people who we say who we are. We actually live that out. Why is integrity important? Maybe a couple of reasons. Why do you guys think? Maybe some other reasons. Some things that makes it. Why does this matter? So I'm evaluating. Okay, what are some areas where we ought to have integrity? What is integrity? But why does integrity really matter? Someone give me their opinion. Just yell out an answer with thought. Why does integrity really matter? Why should I have integrity?
Because you can't trust somebody if you know that they're going to act one way towards you and then go to somebody else and act a completely different way. You're
not going to be a trustworthy person. People won't trust you if you don't have integrity. You're right. There are some people I won't trust them as much as far as I can throw them. Because I know that they don't have integrity. Anyone else? Any other thoughts why we ought to have integrity? A couple of things I jotted down that I thought, even evaluate my own life. A lack of integrity binds us to hiding. If you lack integrity, then you have to hide areas of your life from people. You have to continually be in hiding. You have to live in darkness. If I say I'm this way, but I act this way, I have to hide this from people. If I tell people I'm a man of purity and I don't look at pornography, but yet I go home and look at pornography, I have to hide my iPhone from people. I have to hide my laptop. I have to cover my tracks. And I tell you, I've lived a long time. I lived a long part of my life not being who I said I was. I'm going to tell you, living in darkness sucks. It feels so good to be able to say, my code on my phone is 2525. Anyone want to come check it? You can check anytime you want. It feels good. And in fact, there are people in my life that come and grab my phone and check it. Joel Kaufman checks it. Keith Winter is one of the parents of one of our students in our youth student ministry. Checks my phone regularly. I love being able to hand my phone over to someone and say, hey, go check my phone. Look at what I've been doing. Look at my text messages. Look at the pictures I've taken. Look at my internet history. It feels good. I don't have nothing to hide. I have nothing to hide. It feels so good to not hide anything. It feels great. I love it. It sucks having to hide. A lack of integrity keeps you from being honest with people. You have to continually lie. Mark Twain, great writer, Mark Twain once said this, if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember. If you tell the truth, you never have to remember. But if you lied to someone, you have to remember what you lied about. You have to keep your story straight. People put stock in what you say. People trust you. I'll give you an example. Sometimes I drink Diet Coke. I am trusting Coke when they tell me that there's no calories and no carbs and no sugar. I'm putting my trust in them. That they're going to actually do what they say they're going to do. I know they're putting cancer into the Diet Coke as well. That's not good for me. You know, but when a restaurant says that they have organic food, or if a restaurant says that they don't put antibiotics in their chicken, I've got to trust them, right? If I want to live an organic lifestyle. What about people with food allergies? What if you're allergic to peanut oil? You have a deathly allergy to peanut oil, and if there's peanut oil in something, you would die. And you go to a Chinese restaurant, and they tell you there's no peanut oil in it, but yet they cook peanut oil. They cook the food that you're going to order in peanut oil. You could die. Their lack of integrity will cost you potentially your life or your health. And when we lack integrity, we potentially cause great damage to people around us. A couple passages of Scripture, some of the things in the Bible that God kind of throws out there to us that I think are important. If you have your Bibles, maybe someone look up someone look up Proverbs chapter 20, verse 7 for me. 27. Jonathan will look that up for me. Someone will look up Psalm 25:21. Psalm, Elizabeth, 25:21. Someone will look up Proverb 11:3. 11:3. Caleb got that all right? And someone will look up 1 Peter 2:9 for me. 1 Peter 2:9. Who wants to look up 1 Peter 2:9? All right, here we go. Sweet, Jonathan, you got that?
Yep.
All right, here we go. Proverbs 20, verse 7.
The righteous man leads a blameless life. Blessed are his children after him.
Say it, read one more time real loud.
The righteous man leads a blameless life. Blessed are his children after him.
When you live a life of integrity and righteousness, blessings follow you. Blessings follow you. In a variety of ways. People will trust you. Your employers will trust you more. They're going to want to give you more responsibility, which leads to potentially more money or more opportunity. When you have integrity and people can trust you, it leads to more opportunities to do things. It leads to greater friendships. People trust you more. They want to be around you. I know people who lack integrity, and many of them often lack friendships. When you lack integrity, you will lack blessings in your life. Integrity will lead to blessings. A lack of integrity will rob you of blessings. Psalm 25:21. Who's got that? All right.
Use all your skill to put me together. I wait to see your finished product. I read the message just, so that's why it's there.
That's right. Someone have that in ESV for me? Psalm 25:21. Read it in the message again.
Use all your skill to put me together. I wait to see your finished product.
That's very different. Eugene Peterson. He's the guy who did the message. Eugene Peterson. Yeah.
May integrity and uprightness preserve me, for I wait for you.
Integrity preserves me. It protects me. I'll give you a couple of examples. We have this thing in the United States called building codes, right? So we didn't have these for a long time. We're not allowed to just throw up a building. There are certain codes that are set. And we are now trusting the builders to actually build a building according to code. So we know the building won't collapse and kill us when we're inside the building. That's a form of integrity. If the builder says he's going to build it a certain way, we're expecting him to do it. And if he has integrity, It protects everyone in the building. If a builder lacks integrity, it puts all of us in jeopardy. If you have integrity, it protects you and it protects other people. Let me give you another great example that I know of. I know lots of pastors that have fallen into sexual sin. I think many of us probably have heard stories of someone who was a preacher or someone in ministry that lacked integrity, and therefore it ended up ruining their life and their ministry and their marriage. But if you have integrity, it protects your ministry and your marriage. Another great example I heard one time of a woman who, my youth pastor told me the story, a woman he knew in his church, and when he was growing up, who had gone to the ATM machine. It's when ATM machines were relatively new at the time. At some point in the 70s, ATM machines were relatively new, and they were not everywhere you went like they are today. She went to an ATM machine at a bank and put her card in, got money out, and she ended up getting too much money. She asked for X amount of dollars, and they gave her extra money. So the next morning, she went into the bank and actually handed the money back and said, hey, it gave me too much money yesterday. That's integrity. You say you are going to do the right things when the time comes, and she actually did it. And I think, if my memory serves me right, it was something like she asked for $300 and it gave her $400. The ATM machine gave her an extra $100. And she went back to the bank the next morning and returned $100. Well, a couple months later, like 6 months later, she was at the ATM and put for a certain amount of money in, and actually shorted her by $200. She put in for $300 and only gave her $100, but it charged her account $300. She went into the bank the next morning, went to the bank manager and said, hey, you charged me $300 for my account, but only gave me $100. The bank manager didn't believe her. He's like, you're lying. The machine doesn't make that kind of mistake. And one of the employees from the bank came to kind of her defense and said, I remember her 6 months ago when she turned in the $100 and she couldn't, and I believe her. And the bank actually ended up refunding her the money. Her integrity in that moment protected her in a future moment. A great biblical example of this, one of the greatest biblical examples I can find is this, a man named Joseph. If you're not familiar, in the book of Genesis, Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers and was a slave in Egypt and was working for a man named Potiphar. And he had been such a man of integrity. It came to a point where Potiphar's wife had the hots for Joseph and tried to seduce him and tried to come on to him, and he rejected her. And what ends up happening is, what some people think that this was that Potiphar didn't believe Joseph. Actually, if you read the text carefully, the account in the book of Genesis, Potiphar actually believed Joseph. Actually, what would happen if a non-Egyptian citizen had been accused of rape of an Egyptian in that culture, he would actually have gotten the death penalty. And so Potiphar, when Potiphar's wife, and Potiphar was one of the richest, most powerful men in all of Egypt. Potiphar's wife says, he tried to rape me. Potiphar actually doesn't believe him. Potiphar goes, listen, and Joseph's like, listen, I swear by my God. And Potiphar says, listen, anyone who knows Joseph knows that if he swears by his God, he's a man of his word. And I believe him. So Potiphar, instead of having Joseph executed, he actually ends up having him thrown in prison, which is a form of grace, because he should have been executed. And Potiphar knew, listen, if my wife's got the house for this guy, I gotta get rid of him. And I'm not sure what to do with him, so I'll just have him thrown in prison as a form of grace rather than executing him. But Joseph was a man of integrity, and Joseph, because he had lived his life of integrity, Potiphar chooses to believe Joseph over his own wife. Because Joseph was a man of integrity. And Joseph's integrity ends up sparing his life. And eventually ends up sparing the entire nation of Israel. Ends up protecting the entire nation. Who has Proverbs 11:3?
The integrity of the upright guides them, but the crookedness of the treacherous destroys them.
When you are a person of integrity, it will guide you and it will make a way for you. When you are a person of integrity, it will open up opportunities for you. Who has 1 Peter 2:9?
But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light.
When you are living a holy life, when you are living out excellencies, you will have ministry opportunities to proclaim the gospel. When you are a person of integrity, people will look at you and go, I want to hear what you have to say. This person is honest about who they are. They actually live it out. I want to listen to what they say. In fact, the number one reason people will not listen to you is if you are not who you say you are. That's it. That's the number one reason why people will not listen to you. if you are not who you say you are. But if you are who you say you are, if you're honest about who you are, and you live a life that's open before people, people will actually listen to what you have to say. They will actually listen to the gospel you have to say. And so there's a variety of reasons why we ought to have integrity. It keeps us from having to live hidden lives. Keeps us from having to lie to people. It keeps us from having to protect ourselves and having to hide our tracks. Integrity leads to blessings. Integrity protects us. Integrity guides us. Integrity gives us great ministry opportunities to proclaim the gospel. But the greatest reason why we ought to have integrity is because it honors God. 1 Chronicles 29:17 says this. 1 Chronicles 29:17. I know, my God, that you test the heart and have pleasure in uprightness. In the uprightness of my heart I have freely offered all these things, and now I have seen your people. I know that you have pleasure in uprightness. All of those reasons to have integrity are good, but there's one main reason why we ought to have integrity. Why we ought to be who we say we're going to be. That's because God is honored by it. Because God takes pleasure in it. Even if you have integrity and no one ever sees it, and it never leads to the good things that we've talked about already, ultimately, it makes the heart of God smile. When we have integrity, when we are who we say we are, God looks at us and He takes pleasure in it. God prefers that we be people of integrity because He is a being of integrity. He is faithful to who He says He's going to be. And He longs for us to be like Him. And so if for no other reason, I know that when I actually do what God wants me to do, and I actually am who I say I'm going to be, God smiles. Even if no one else sees it, God goes, that's my boy. Even if when I'm walking through the mall, and there's some girl wearing something inappropriate, and I say I'm a man of purity, and I'm not going to look that way, and I choose to look away, even if no one ever notices, even if there's never a tangible benefit here on planet Earth, God says, that's my boy. Thank you, Kenny, for being who you say you are. And God smiles. And I don't know about you, but I want to make God smile. I want to make Him happy. I want to share one last story with you, and then the team's going to, Daphne and Andrew are going to come and lead us in worship. I heard a couple years ago, someone told me this. A good friend of mine at Team Mania Ministries, a guy by the name of Todd Mayfield, told me a great story about a woman he was talking about a story about a guy who was on an airplane, and he's sitting in first class, and there's a woman who comes to sit next to him, a woman that he happened to think was very attractive, and so he's looking at this girl, and he's saying, he strikes up a conversation with her. He said, man, this girl's really pretty, So he starts talking to this girl and says, I want to, just as they took off, he says to her, I want to offer you $1 million to sleep with me when the plane lands at my hotel, where you say you're going to be at. And the girl's like, what? Are you kidding me? She's offended and she's angry. And so she ends up rejecting him and being angry. But then as the flight's going on, she's kind of thinking to herself, $1 million, I could really do a lot with $1 million. I probably wouldn't have to work ever again. Pay off all my debt. And this is, $1 million. And so finally she kind of changes her mind and says to the guy, okay, when we land, I'll go back to your hotel and I'll sleep with you for $1 million. That'll be great. Because it'll be $1 million. And so he goes, okay, great, I'll give you $1 million to sleep with you. And so they strike up a conversation and they seem to be going well. And she's pretty excited, he's pretty excited. And then they land and they end up getting their baggage. They end up going to the hotel and they walk to the hotel room, and right before anything happens, he says, hey, I gotta tell you something. Hey, listen, I know I offered you $1 million, but I actually don't have $1 million. So how about I give you $100 and you sleep with me for $100? And she gets super pissed and she's angry. She's like, what kind of girl do you think I am? And he looks at her and says, well, I think we've already established what type of girl you are. Now we're just haggling over price. And I think sometimes when we get something in return, it's a really high value, we're willing to sacrifice our integrity. But when we're not getting something in return of real high value, we think to ourselves how easy it is to be people of integrity when what we're getting in return maybe isn't all that valuable. I share that story I share that because I want us to really evaluate tonight. Really take reflection and say, who am I? What type of person really am I? Because it was obvious the type of girl that woman was. She's the type of girl that was willing to sleep with a guy for money. That's who she is. Now, she had a high price point. But we clearly established what type of girl she was. And I think, if we're honest, I think there are areas in our lives, I know for me, there are areas in my heart and my life where I claim to be a person of integrity and of righteousness and holiness, but if the price was right, I'd be willing to make a deal. I'd be willing to sell out and be willing to sin and be willing to sacrifice my holiness and be willing to make a wrong choice because I'm going to get something in return that was really valuable. And in that moment, really what I'm telling God is, God, this thing I'm getting in return is more valuable than you. And my desire is that we would be people that we would always say, God, you are always more valuable than anything I could ever possibly get in return. That God, there's no price that anyone can offer me. There's nothing of value that can ever be offered to me where I'd be willing to sell out. And how do we do this? How do we get to that point where we really are willing to sacrifice anything and there's no cost? It's by saturating our lives with the gospel. Constantly reminding ourselves that we were created in the image of God, that we corrupted and we separated ourselves from God, and the story could have ended there. He could have said, to hell with you. But he says, I love you. I love you. I love you so much that I refuse to let the story end there. And he chooses to interject himself in our lives, and he rescues us, and he restores us back to a relationship with him. And the only thing that could continually help us develop in areas of integrity and character and to live a life where we are willing to never compromise our integrity is to remind ourselves of the gospel every single day. I don't know about you, but I got to preach to myself every single day. Remind myself of the gospel and remind myself that he loves me. And that's the only thing that sustains me. So I don't know what you need to do in your life, whether that's maybe introducing some new friends in your life that will speak truth, like we talked about earlier tonight, and that will maybe remind you of the gospel, whether that's maybe spending time with God, whether it be reading the Bible daily, maybe getting rid of some of the media or music in your life that doesn't remind you of the gospel, but finding ways to introduce the gospel and remind yourself of the gospel every single day, because that's the only thing that will sustain us. Let's everyone just stand for a moment. Just gonna pray, and I'm gonna ask Andrew and Daphne to lead us. God, we can't do it on our own ability. So God, I cry out to you tonight. I ask that you would give me the faith to trust what you say, to trust that you really are good, to trust that anything I sacrifice will be worth it. God, give me the faith to truly, truly give you all of my allegiance and all of my loyalty. God, give me the faith and the strength and the fortitude to actually be who you want me to be. God, give me the fortitude and the faith to be who I say I'm going to be. And God, give me the audacity and the courage to be honest when I'm not righteous and I'm not holy. Give me the faith and the power to trust that you're going to love me no matter what. God, I pray that tonight we would be reflective as we worship and we sing to you, that tonight we would not lie to ourselves about where we are in our faith. We would truly, truly be honest. But tonight you would speak to us. That as we reflect, that tonight we would identify the areas where we've lacked integrity. And that we would implement things in our lives that would cause us to actually be who you've called us to be. We love you, Jesus.